Hello, I'm Dr. David Pendergrass. I have the privilege of counseling individuals and couples often as work as a senior pastor, and I've now done that for, I think maybe 15 years or so or more. And something that is a very common theme when I counsel people who struggle with, all kinds of things, but particularly those who struggle with anxiety, stress, is something that struggle with is shame. Now, I've talked about shame often in my videos, on other YouTube videos, and my podcast. And if you want to learn more about that, go to my podcast, Glimpse of the Kingdom, A Glimpse of the Kingdom on Spotify or anywhere you listen to your podcast, A Glimpse of the Kingdom, and look up things like shame and guilt and anxiety and stress. Look up those key words and you'll see what I'm talking about. As a child, literal child, you and I were taught all kinds of things, and we started believing false things about things. We just did. We started believing false things about ourselves. And this is really, really common when you have parents who dismiss what you felt or you thought. And so when they said things like, be quiet, or, shut up, stop crying, I'll give you something to cry about. Or what's the big deal? Or get over it, cowboy up, cowgirl up, those kind of things. And or if you were scared and they just fussed at you, every time you felt sensitive or needy and they said something that was not nurturing, every single time that happened, one more time, when you felt needy and helpless and you were dependent, which you should have been as a child. It's the state of a child. When you felt those things and you had an authority figure, a parental figure, and not give you validation and say, I'm so sorry, baby, what's going on? Oh, come here, baby, it's okay to cry. I'm proud of you for showing your emotions or whatever. If they said anything at all that dismissed that, we call it discounting, then what happened was you didn't feel better. You didn't feel better. Instead, what you learned is to believe that those needs that you have are bad. There must be something wrong with me. I'm so weak, apparently, and weak is bad. Well, of course you're weak. Weak isn't bad, but that's what you believed because you're made fun of when you're weak. If you were sad and you were made fun of, oh, look at the little dummy crying, look at the baby crying, you're going to stop it, and you made fun of you. Well, you learn that being sad is a bad thing. So when I'm in a needy state, a helpless child state, which you should have been and were in, but if you learn it incorrectly, then you learn bad things about yourself. You develop false beliefs about yourself. One more time. You didn't feel better. You learned to feel badly about your needs. That develops in life into what we call shame. Now, sometimes people make a distinction with that and toxic shame. I don't. Shame is just shame. Shame is feeling badly about yourself. So what happens if you use transaction analysis terms, there's like a wounded child inside of us, and we tell that child to go away. That child to go away, be quiet, shut it up. Now, your child didn't shut up and didn't get quiet. He or she, I'll use he because I'll picture myself as a little boy, he's still sad and still wounded, but to get him to be quiet, you fuss at him, or you feed him chocolate, or you smoke weed, or you get drunk, or you look at pornography, or you shop, or you gossip, or you beat people up, and you get in fights all the time. There's all kinds of things you deal with. That child is always needy, and since he's still needy, and he feels badly for it, and you keep telling him to be quiet and get over it, then it never goes away, and you have this deep-seated, it's a very, very sad no way to live. But it's passed on to us because we are, in fact, so shapeable as children, and we should be, and we are. It reminds me of something years ago. There was a gentleman, I can't remember his name now, he was the principal of an all-black school, and I think it was in New York, and he made the point, seemed like a real nice, educated guy. He turned the school around, and he said something I've never forgotten. He said, we go in there and teach parents how to parent. And because they have no idea, they're all low-income black families. He said the only thing they know to do is to beat their kids. They don't know about timeout. They don't know about talking to their kids. They don't know about these things. He said we have to teach them. And of course we do that to help diminish how much the kids are, of course, being beaten, but also they can feel more loved and warmth and compassion and do better in school and better in life. And he said the reason why they have beat their kids is because they themselves were beaten, and they were beaten, and they were beaten all the way back to slavery. Slaves, the people who had slave masters beat their own kids. And he said it's because they were teaching their kids to be beaten, like you have to be quiet or that you'll get hurt more. I'm not sure how, I'd be interested to see the literature on that to see if that's why. But I'm sure that is part of the reason why, that is to say, I've got to train my child to keep their mouth shut or they'll get killed. But it's also possible that the reason why they beat their kids is because they themselves were beaten. That is to say, it was passed on from them. And sometimes in Christian circles, we call this a generational curse. So that's not what Deuteronomy means by that. But anyway, that's sometimes what it's called. We pass down illegitimate, terrible, evil, hateful patterns to our children. And that's what happens. And that's what happened to you as a child, probably, if you struggle with shame. You probably had children and parents who were not taking care of themselves, and they would pass on to you. And then they felt shame for being sad. They felt shame for being needy. And so they were going to let you do that in their presence because they couldn't allow themselves to do that. And that was passed on and passed on and passed on. So stop doing that. That's in my video. That's it. Just stop doing that. So I was talking to someone the other day about that, and she said, a very good question. She said, well, if that's all true, and you get these false beliefs. Now, by the way, the more I described that, the more she went, yeah, that's exactly right. I did learn those things. I do that when I teach people in the counseling part. The reason I talk about that is because, first off, it's true, but also because that truth sets you free. Now, it's very, very painful. But for many people, and maybe you watch this video, this is the first time in your entire life you have ever been told what I just said, which is you were taught incorrectly. Your needs do matter. So one of the major chief goals I have when I work with people who struggle with this is learning to accept themselves, is to bring back that wounded child into their proverbial lap and say, I love you. You're welcome to feel whatever you would feel. With all your neediness, I will help take care of your needs. You are with me. I'm with you. I'm never leaving you. I'm never going to tell you to get over or shut up, move on, cowboy up. I'm never going to make fun of you. I'm never, ever, I'm with you. And for people who struggle a lot with shame, that is very difficult for them to do. I mean, if you struggle with shame, you probably have a difficult time crying. You might cry for other people. You might be very empathetic for other people, relatives, and so forth. Maybe cry at commercials, but not for yourself. You might have mercy and grace for other people, but not for yourself. You might have an easy time being compassionate to other people. I'm so sorry you're going through that horrible. Even if they caused that pain, you probably have a lot of compassion for them, but not for yourself. And so I always ask people, why? Why is that? No, I don't know. I don't. And I tell you why. It's because you have shame. You struggle with shame. You don't feel you're worthy to be loved and have compassion and for someone to have grace for you. And that includes yourself. That is to say, you're not accepting yourself. Another way of saying that not accepting yourself is saying, I don't have compassion on myself, or I don't love myself. I had a person the other day say, okay, well, David, why does it matter? Why accept myself? Why does it matter that I accept myself? And I said there are 3 reasons. Here are the 3 reasons. What I said, why you need to accept yourself. Number 1, if you are a Christian, you have the moral duty to do it. You have the moral imperative to love yourself. Jesus said, when asked what's the greatest commandment, Mark 12:29-31, he said, of course, love God with all your heart, soul, strength, strength and mind, and then love your neighbor as yourself, Mark 12:31. Love your neighbor as yourself. You care for your neighbor's good like you care for your own good. You need to care for your own good. You need to love yourself. Now, that's not Jesus's point. His point is you care for someone else's needs, but it's predicated upon the assumption that you do, in fact, care for yourself. If you did not care for yourself, you couldn't care for your neighbor's self, period. You have the moral imperative to do this. You have the moral imperative to accept and love all of you, especially the needy part of you, the part of you that has emotions and has wants and desires. And if you spent your life or any amount of time telling that part of you to go away, be quiet, buck up, you're hurting yourself and you're not doing what God has designed you to do. Now, hear me well, please. I'm not fussing at you saying you're a dirty, rotten sinner because this whole life you've always been, no, you're wounded. You picked up false nonsense, but it's time to stop. Much like if you were beating your children because your parents beat you, I'd say it's bad that you're beating your kids, but you learned it well. You got 13 PhDs on how to beat your kids. But now that you realize that's not good, you have the moral imperative to stop beating your kids. You have the moral imperative to love yourself. Jesus said to do it. Implicitly, he said to do it, so you have to do it. You have to work on whatever it takes to stop rejecting a huge chunk of you, which is the part of you that's like a child, a wounded child. Secondly, not accepting yourself or loving yourself causes much lower quality of life. Not accepting or loving yourself causes your quality of life to go way down. Your anxiety goes way up all the time. Anxiety is not bad itself, but it sure is uncomfortable. But your stress levels will go up. You're much more prone to depression, addiction, self-harming behavior, harming other people, disassociation, that is not really feeling like in your body. A laundry list of psychological disorders can happen, or even symptoms of disorders can happen because you are chronically, constantly rejecting your own needs and your own emotional states. So it's imperative that your quality of life get better. I would argue that's how God designed you. And the way to do that, at minimum, And one of the things is learn how to love yourself. So if you don't love yourself, it's going to really hurt the quality of life. And evidence of that is every single person I've ever counseled in my life has struggled with shame. Their quality of life is not phenomenal. That's why they're seeing me. They're just not. They're over sexers. They're alcoholics. They're overeaters. They're over everything. They're codependent on people. On and on it goes. And so that can be healed. So one more time, the first one is if you're a Christian, well, I'd say every human being has a moral duty to do it. 2, if you don't do it, much lower quality of life. The third thing is, this is certainly for the Christian, but if you're not a Christian, it's still true for you, but you're way off. And that is to say, it really, really affects your own ministry. Your ability to act like Jesus is greatly diminished. Why? Because Jesus said you care for your neighbor as much as you care for your own. When you love yourself well and practice boundaries and have compassion for yourself and grace on yourself and stand up for yourself and have a voice, when you do those things for yourself, you do that well for other people. Bullying makes you very angry. People taking advantage of other people makes you very angry. It should, because you don't tolerate it for yourself. When you're around people who say mean things about themselves, or other people say mean things about themselves, you get upset about that because you don't do that about yourself. When you hear people say really critical, hateful things about other people or you themselves, no, don't say things like that about yourself. So there's all kinds of things you're better at. So when you do not love yourself or accept yourself, you're not living to your full potential as a disciple of Jesus. There's ministry opportunities you're missing because you're not accepting all of who you are. You're just not. So what do you do about this? All right, just one quick thing. What do you do about this? Take a bunch of medication. Well, medication can help you, that's true, but it doesn't help everything. The best thing you can do, frankly, is, in my experience in education, is what's called cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. You can do CBT workbooks, self-workbooks online on Amazon. You do it yourself if you want to. If you want to meet with someone else, you can look at people online for that. I help people with that all the time in my counseling practice, and at least helping people. So all that to say, that's common. But if you're a Christian, something that I want to say, one little caveat about this, a lot of people say, well, I just need some Bible verses. That's very common when they come see me as a senior pastor. They say, I met with you today because I need some Bible verses to deal with the fact that I say mean things about myself all the time, or because I'm addicted to this, or I'm over shopping or overeating, whatever. I just use the Bible verses. That'll solve it. Or I'm depressed. So I usually end with Bible verses last. I always end with them last. Because the reason why is because when someone comes to me saying, I just need some Bible verses basically to feel better, they're treating the Bible like it's a quick fix medication. And so let me say it this way. It's not the solution to the problem. Let me nuance that. For example, if you're struggling with depression, you're not scripture depleted, right? It's not Bible verse depletion. Someone says, you're depressed? How many Bible verses do you have memorized? 27. There's your problem. If you had 30, you'd never get depressed. That's your problem. Your ignorance of Bible verses is the cause of your depression. I've never heard that in my entire life. And if a pastor or someone ever tells you that, please don't listen. And that's the stupidest thing. Now, there are a lot of dumb things I've heard. That's one of the dumbest I've ever heard. No one does that. You're not Bible verse depleted. That doesn't make any sense. Secondly, I'd say to that, at no point in the New Testament, ever in the New Testament, when someone's sad, do they quote to them Bible verses. When Jesus meets Mary and Martha, John 11, Lazarus is dead, and he goes to weep, and they're weeping. Jesus doesn't say, what are you crying about? Do you not know the Psalms? Have you read Psalm 20, the Lord's my shepherd? If you would just know your Bible verses, you wouldn't be crying right now, dummy. When Paul writes to the Romans, and he says, those people who are weeping and they're grieving, he says, instead of saying weep with those that weep, you should have said, don't weep with those that weep. Just quote some Bible verses. Why are they sad? What's wrong with you? He doesn't say that. In fact, he says, weep with those who weep, rejoice with those who rejoice. I can go down the list if you want. At no point in the New Testament do they quote Bible verses to make someone just get over it or feel better. They come alongside them, they encourage them, they comfort them, they cry with them, they grieve with them, they love on them. There's all kinds of things they do, and that support is imperative, is important. Well, David, what about Bible verses at all? Can I use them? Well, sure. I would, and I would cite them as often as I can. It's just that saying things like, God has not given me a spirit of fear, but of sound power and love and sound mind and self-control, doesn't make your anxiety go away instantaneously. Because the problem of why you have anxiety is not because you didn't know that Bible verse, and now that you know it, the problem is solved. The problem is something else. Now, that Bible verse can encourage you. It can remind you that God is good and that you can cast your cares upon him because he cares about you in 1 Peter. You can say, Jesus says, do not worry. Look at the birds and the lilies. That stuff is very encouraging. It can be encouraging. But if you find yourself still feeling worried, even though you quote that Bible verse to your nosebleeds, if you're like most people, then you're going to struggle. I don't have enough faith. I don't have faith. That's my problem. Well, maybe you do have really good faith. Maybe that's not the solution to the problem, and that's okay. Instead, there are other methods to help us think better. And so, yes, I'd quote Bible verses. Yes, I'd go to them, but I would not use them as a get quick rich scheme. People that like it's a medication the same with those Bible verses, like they're a pill, like they're a scriptural Xanax. I would just quote a bunch of Bible verses. I'll feel better. I don't find that persuasive. I've never seen it work my entire life. I've never, ever, not for a significant problem. If it's a little baby thing, sure. But if you struggle with shame and struggle with saying horrible things about yourself and struggle not accepting and struggle with not crying, if it's difficult for you to cry, if it's difficult for you to unwind, if you say me, all that stuff, I've never heard just a Bible verse or two that just makes it all go away. That's why God invented Christian therapists. That's why. Because they study human behavior and they take the best of the Christian worldview and bring it to bear on how the human psyche works. That's a good thing. I think it's a really good thing. So there you go. Hope that encourages you. And to get some help, reach out, get the help you need. There's always help to be had. You do not have to spend the rest of your entire life struggling with shame and struggling with not accepting yourself and loving yourself. You don't need to. If you want to, you can. But I don't want to. I want to be whole. I want to be well, that's for sure. I hope you like this. Share this video, please, with your friends. Let people know. Write your comments down below. When you write comments and share the video, YouTube's algorithm picks that up and says, hey, people like this video. I'll keep promoting those videos. That helps me out and helps hopefully some good content. If you have any questions or comments, let me know below, and I'll do the best job I can to help you out. God bless you, and we'll see you next time.